Before today's topic, a quick disclaimer. The stories and data we share come from the states that we practice in and the experiences we personally had, which can differ greatly across our country and certainly the globe. This is not a professional advice show. So get comfy and let's discuss death.
Hello, and welcome to MortMic, a down-to-earth discussion on death and dying. I'm Jem.
And I'm Red, and we are your evildoer entombers this week. It's always a national or global tragedy when we lose somebody who's left the world in better shape before they passed on. The Mother Teresas or the Gandhis of the world. The people whose karmic scale tipped in their favor for just being excellent to those around them. But what about the people who weren't so good? Neo-Nazis, cross-burners, and people who don't put shopping carts back in the return. They have to have funerals too, so what's it like planning a funeral for a bad guy? If it makes you feel better, Hitler didn't really have a funeral. He and Eva Braun were taken out of the bunker and just burned pretty fairly unceremoniously.
So they say.
So they say. You know he's actually cryogenically frozen at Walt Disney with Walt Disney. So.
Yeah, they're holding hands in the same cryostat. No, but really it is I don't think people think about this too much because, when the bad guy dies, it's kind of like, all right, he's dead. No one really cares anymore. Usually people don't care in general to even attend the funeral or take care of the arrangements and things like this. So, it really is kind of a big question, what happens to these people. They have to get to the same level of care that everyone else does, right?
Right, exactly. Do you have any stories maybe about interacting with families or people like this?
I mean, I think anyone in the business has periods where they come across certain, individuals or certain, certain families dealing with certain things. Working in the medical examiner's office, I especially in the area that I do work, there's a lot of I don't know how to say it a better way than white supremacy and Confederacy flag waving people, and a lot of gangs centered around that. So these guys come in and they're covered with swastika tattoos or white supremacy gang symbols, and it's not great looking this up on Google and being oh, that's what that means,
right?
And I would say what we're going to talk about a little bit later is that I still have to do my job no matter what my internalized opinions might be about what this person possibly was like in life. Maybe the tattoos are old, maybe I don't know, blah blah blah, but I still have to do my job regardless of what they might have been like in life.
I've definitely had my fair share of interactions with types like that. I remember actually had worked a visitation for a young person that had gotten killed, and one of the people that attended the service saw on the table a week later. And based on the crowd that he was around, I could tell what kind of things he did in his spare time. And after undressing the guy, had a nice amount of swastika tattoos and all sorts of stuff. And it really does challenge you to you have to do right by any person that you interact with, regardless of their beliefs. You still have to embalm them just as good. You have to treat them just as good. You have to treat their families just as good.
Right.
But that was the first year of my funeral director career, and that really, I was shooketh, as the kids say.
Yeah.
I didn't really know how to interact with that.
It's really hard and it's really difficult, I think, especially because in the death industry, you are taking care of these people and you're there for them in their hardest moments. But if they are people that you don't agree with on a moral base level, or they are bad people, that's like, it's weird. It's very hard, I think.
Yeah, it's extremely unsettling. I had something else similar where like I had sat down with the widow to make arrangements for her husband, and like she was super cool. Like she's like one of those punk rock grannies, like got purple hair, and she's like a biker family. And she was like, "Oh yeah, my husband, he did so much art. He painted." I'm like, "That would be amazing to display around the room. Like, please bring in like a bunch of his artwork." And the family has started setting up, and I come into the visitation room on the day of the services, and I'm just like jaw drop, like Confederate flags painted everywhere. They brought his motorcycle in. They had like Confederate flags like waving off the back of it, and I was just like, "Oh no, but you were so cool."
I know, and it's just like that's. Have you ever? Okay, this is like an internet meme where it's like, okay, there was this guy at like a punk bar, like a hole in the wall kind of bar, and the bartender's like sees this new guy come in and sit down, and the bartender looks at this new guy and he says, "Nope, get out, you're not allowed here." And the new guy was like, "Come on, man, I just like sat down for a drink." And then the bartender goes to tell the other guy that you didn't see that guy, but all of his badges on his like vest and all of his tattoos were like white supremacy, like swastika, like neo-Nazi stuff. And it's like, you got to get those guys out early because they come in, they act nice, they are normal people. And then as soon as you know it, like they're bringing all your friends, and all of a sudden your punk bar is now a neo-Nazi bar.
Right, exactly. You can't give them a place to be. Like, you have to stomp it out completely.
But, that's not the case in death, like in funerals, because these people died too. And, like, we as professionals in the death industry, we have to provide a space for them to grieve. I think, like to varying degrees, that everyone kind of deserves that. And, like, I just like it. It's so hard to say that because I don't want it to be true, but it's true. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And because it gets harder than that.
Yeah.
for some cases.
For sure. Yeah. I think one of the like toughest and just kind of like weirdly unsettling cases that I did, as a death investigator, and I got called to a scene. Older man, probably in his like, I don't know, 50s or 60s. He had like white hair. He was found in his vehicle. It was looking like a suicide. We weren't entirely sure. There wasn't anything to suggest, homicide. But of course, we always treat it. When you're investigating, you kind of always treat something as a homicide until proven otherwise. So, we're, looking him up and bringing him in and, going through his belongings in his car and stuff like this. And we're not really sure he had any family. We're not really sure where he came from. The people that own the property said that he pulled up the other day and they asked him like who he was, and he said he was just like lost or something. It was very like a weird, vague sort of thing. And then we're going through his belongings and we find a letter that he was being like summoned to court. What are those called? He was served or something like this, right?
What are those? Oh, what are those called? I watched so many crime shows.
I don't want to say
subpoenaed.
So yeah, he was subpoenaed.
Okay.
We're very professional. He was subpoenaed. So the cops look him up, and it turns out that he's being called to court. He's being summoned to court for child pornography charges.
Ooh.
So, yeah. So when when I woke up as an investigator, I'm seeing this like, little old man and, probably committed suicide. And it's like, oh man, that's really sad. Like, I wonder if he has any family. And then, finding that out, it's like everything changes. It's like a total 180. And, but, the thing is that because he was being summoned to court, he's dead now. This was a really important legal case that we had to do. And so I have to do my best job. And, that includes taking care and being really observant and making sure that, his body wasn't compromised in any way. The scene wasn't compromised in any way. I had to do my job really, really good for this really, really bad person. And that's just like how it is for me in my job. And it's hard sometimes. It's definitely, it's it's just it's hard to think about like how the situation could be put in like a positive light. You know what I mean?
Yeah, honestly. Like, how did that develop? Like, did you ever hear anything about like his family, like, and the services that he ended up having after the fact?
No, he didn't. I can't remember. It was so long ago, and I don't want to, say anything identifying, but I remember that he didn't really have any family. I think that eventually maybe like a long lost cousin or nephew or brother-in-law or something like this came and picked him up, but I think it was really just like because he was this person, and I'm sure if this stuff came to light, I'm sure that no one really wanted to care for him, but he did end up getting picked up. He wasn't in our morgue he was in there for a little long, but not like he wasn't abandoned, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, not like an indigent or anything.
Yeah, because I know that investigation and like doing the law side of things is one thing, but then when you have family that is trying to have services, have you had services that have been for someone who has done something this terrible or bad or something like this?
Actually, we did. It was not a family that I took care of directly, but obviously with it being like high profile, everyone in the company knows about it.
Yeah.
So there was a person that had murdered their 3 children, their spouse, their family pet, and then committed suicide.
Wow.
all in one go. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was
oh my gosh.
That was a big one.
Wow.
Like I mean, not to say that like the loss of human life isn't like tragic, but like to also kill the family pet, like come on.
I know. Just a sidebar here, it's always makes me so much more upset when I get like a suicide case and the pet has also been euthanized before the suicide. That makes it much worse.
Yeah.
But holy crap. Like what?
And like that was such a tender like line to tread with that, because there's obviously parts of the family, like the family members of the spouse, and like of course they did not want to see him. Like they did not want him to be like, I mean, obviously like I would feel the same way. Like that betrayal, and but then there was other members of the family that wanted to see all of them, so we had to be really creative with having the services. Granted, they were private, they were just for like immediate family, and then they were having like a memorial service later on. But
that's so like if my uncle killed like my aunt and like all of her kids and the dog and then himself, like I don't want to, he just can't be there. You would think that his family would take him to like a different funeral home, but like I don't know, that's so crazy to me. But they were all at your funeral home,
all at the same one. And so like parts of the family just went in to see just the kids. And then we had like a separation in the room where like we could move things pretty quickly. And so like when the rest of the family come in, like they actually wanted to see like the spouses together, So like I
really?
I know
that's like I would have very conflicting feelings about that
so
as a professional. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so would I. Yeah, I really. I give big ups to the director that had to take care of that, because I mean that's making 3, 4, 5 arrangements in one day. First of all, that's a lot of arrangements to make in a day, and then like to coordinate something this large and to use the amount of empathy to be able to do it. Like, not that we aren't empathetic with every family, but like, oh my gosh, like the emotional load that's
it's
what I
so had. Just like just one kid in general is so much more emotionally taxing than like anything else.
Oh yeah.
So to have like just that bag, oh my god, that's so insane.
Yeah,
I'm speechless. Like I can't even say anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, like I hope I don't ever have to do an arrangement for something like this someday, but
I mean, like that, unfortunately in America, like stuff like this happens, and it's like, like it has to be dealt with. Like it's not just like, oh, this terrible thing happened and now I'm turning off the news and I don't have to think about it anymore. It's like, no, we got to deal with it now.
Right, exactly. So in situations like that, I mean, there's always news trying to, sniff around, and that's always a really tough thing too, especially when something is so large and so like in the media. Have you ever had issues with cases like that where it's so high profile that I mean, everyone's got a hold of it, or you have to like be secretive about it, or
Yeah, I mean, in my job, I'm dealing with, I'm at the scene of the crime usually, and it's fresh, and I'm dealing with the cops, and like if it's I'm like in a small kind of rural area. If it's a murder, like the news is going to be there. And we're kind of trained actually to not talk to them because, we're not professionals and we're not of any sort of authority. Like we're representing the medical examiner. So it's really the medical examiner who should be talking to the news or deciding with the police what details need to be released and stuff like this. But like I said, from like a small rural setting, like fortunately I haven't really had any like, crazy stuff like, that one family like happen too much. But one thing that does come to mind, and we talked about this on our last episode, is, the Las Vegas massacre that I talked about. Just like short, there was a gunman, who opened fire on a country music festival outdoors on the Las Vegas Strip and killed around 50, 60 people. 30 people were dead on scene immediately. And just and I heard a lecture from the chief medical examiner of Las Vegas who, was talking about how he dealt with, the media and the news and how he dealt with, all the families and all the bodies. Mm-hmm. And, he had the individual, I don't know what the right word, murderer, is that the right word?
Terrorist.
The terrorist. The shooter terror. The shooter killed himself as well. So it was, he is also a body that needs to be dealt with. And I think that's something that people don't think about. So you have these 50, 60 bodies that are being kept in a disaster morgue, which we also talked about on our last episode. So, a cooler all like kind of crammed in there. And then you also have the person that caused all of this. You have their body there too, and you have to store it too. And I think a lot of people would have like a moral dilemma about that. It's like the person that killed all of these people is here, like with them in the same room. And it's like I think there was a lot of tension about that. He did kind of tell us that the employees kind of devised a way to sort of section him off from everyone else, just to like make themselves feel better and kind of,
sure,
block him out. And I think that's just how people cope. And I think it's, appropriate considering the circumstances, but it's just thinking about, okay, well, they have to do autopsies on like all of these bodies. They have to, take care of these bodies for the family and get them out. And there's so much chaos and so much work to be done. And then they also have to provide the same services, provide the same job for the man that caused all of this. And that's, I don't know. It's very, very hard. But I mean, because it's our job and it's what, we have to do, like we have to do it. And they did do what they had to do. And, it just is what it is. Like, I don't know.
I think we're so used to like bad people being segregated out of like polite society, like in jail. Mm-hmm. Like bad people go to jail. Like bad people aren't in the like good parts of society. And like for both parties to end up, the victim and the murderer to end up at the same place, be in the same morgue, like share the same air. It just like it's hard to think about. It's hard.
Yeah, I mean, it's like unnatural.
Yeah. Honestly, if I was a family member, like I would have been like kind of upset actually, even to know that like my loved one who was murdered was like 3 tables away from a murderer that like, killed them. Like there's almost like no good way to feel about this.
Yeah, but because of like the law and because of policies and like space, like it's just how it is. Like you can't have this guy in a separate cooler all by himself. Like that's not how the medical examiner's office works,
Right, you still have to follow laws. You can't just burn him. You can't just, yeet him off a bridge or something. Like there's still this proper channels to go through to, have a disposition for somebody.
Yeah.
And not all of those dispositions end up being, like a public affair. So I have one of my not favorite stories to tell, but something that blindsided me enough that it's one of the first stories I tell as an icebreaker to people about
Really?
my job. So I was messing around. I kind of slow day. I went to the care center just to, shoot the bull with my embalmer friends, and I saw this like big old stuffed penguin, like a big old like stuffed animal on top of like a cremation, like an alternative container. And I go over there. I'm like, ooh, I want to play with this penguin. And the apprentice at the time was like, oh yeah, check out the rest of the stuff that the family brought in, and like, take the penguin out of the bag. And I start to like rifle through this stuff. This sounds so disrespectful. This is like normal, like I promise. And so yeah, I'm going through all of the stuff that they brought in, and like I start pulling stuff out. I'm like, oh, why do they got these like? Why are they having him cremated with his graduation robes? And I start pulling out more stuff. I'm like, man, what a weird hat. And then all of a sudden it hits me that these green silken robes are the robes of a KKK member, and not just any KKK member, a Grand Dragon.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I immediately, like, I just, having had touched something with just the iconography of hatred, just like made me feel dirty, and I immediately dropped them back onto the alternative container. And I'm like, are y'all serious right now? Like, this dude's a KKK Grand Dragon. And they were like, yep, the family wanted us to dress him in the robes to be cremated in, like, in the whole 9 yards. And
oh my God,
I just like,
what? That's just like absolutely like I mean I can't put myself like in these people's shoes. Like, I don't understand like why you would ever want this to be a thing, but like because not only was obviously this a very bad man, his family wanted to honor that in death for him. And like that just, I mean, we did it. We dressed him in the robes to be cremated in, but I guess the one, good side of that is that they're just being burned. So like they deserve to be. Yeah. Right. So that's kind of like a weird silver lining.
Right.
But I mean, come on, like silky green robes and like the title of Grand Dragon. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that was a lot. And like, so the whole thing was like, the funeral home that they had the services out of, it was just one of our direct cremation storefronts. Mm-hmm, and so like this family like had just come in for the cheap cremation, like just, now this is the thing, it hands this bag of stuff to like the admin. It was just like, yeah, we just want him to wear all of this stuff, like whatever. Doesn't go over what's in it. We didn't like document it at the time until it got to the care center. So like the admin that sent all this stuff with the body had no idea what was in there until like she gets a call from the care center. And it's like,
oh my God. That's kind of funny that it sounds like the family was kind of like maybe a little bit ashamed, like maybe didn't want to say it out loud.
Yeah,
and
maybe.
Then they're just like, here, put this stuff on him, please.
Right,
like,
exactly.
We don't want to tell you that this is what we're doing, but oh my goodness.
Like we weren't gonna find out and be like, sus. So I just can't, like with some people. I just can't.
I just like had this thought. Do you think that this is like a common thing for like Southern funeral homes where this is like,
I thought about that a lot when writing this episode, in places where like the common thought processes are like more racist or like gang activity and stuff. Like, are there funeral homes that are like, yeah, okay, this is the funeral home you go to if you're Muslim. This is a funeral home you go to if you are a KKK member,
Yeah, because we talked about in a previous episode, I think, that funeral homes are kind of based on belief systems, segregated in that sort of way. I don't want to use the word segregation, but, they are. And, I that's kind of how we like totally talked about this in a different episode, but we have, Black funeral homes and white funeral homes. And it's kind of not becoming that way anymore, which is a good thing. But, funeral homes are based on like religious beliefs because that's, community, and that's how people like handle each other's deaths and like culture and stuff like this. So I was like wondering if that was a thing. Maybe is like, is there like I don't want to say, is there white supremacy funeral homes in like the South that'll like, oh, that funeral home on the corner, they'll take, racist Grandpa Joe because they're okay with that kind of stuff. It's just very like cultures, man. It's so weird.
It's super weird.
Yeah.
And like being in a place that like there's the culture counterculture, and being by any metropolitan area, it also got me thinking like, where can you draw the line as a death care professional? Like, when are we allowed to say no to a family? Are we even like legally allowed to? Those were questions that kept getting brought up while I was like thinking about all these stories.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for myself as a more medical professional, I would say for any medical professional, like I don't think that you can say no. Like, I can't show up to a scene of death and like see that this guy has swastika tattoos and be like, oh no, I'm not doing this. See you guys. Like, bye. I don't think that I can do that. I would probably get fired. I would lose my job.
Sure.
Unless it was something that was like so offensive to me and I had an understanding supervisor, then maybe. But like, it's not like legally, I don't think I can like refuse service because of things like this.
Sure. And like I heavily debated back and forth with myself after like conjuring up all these stories from my past and listening to other directors' experiences. And like my company's like one of their mottos is that we serve any family no matter what. And it's a policy I generally like because it protects a lot of people who've been like marginalized for forever. Mm-hmm. Like families like that choose abortion, LGBTQ folks, like people like that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, then it also protects those that have less savory belief systems. Now, granted, like I've not really had a family sit across from me and ask for like a cross burning in full KKK regalia to be part of their loved one's services or anything, but I feel like there's like a fine line that needs to be tread at some point.
Mm-hmm. Even like you said, the family that brought like all the Confederacy flag paintings and decorations. It's like, what if one of your visitation staff was like Black, like,
like from a business perspective, you don't want like a client's negative beliefs to reflect on your company, but if you are to turn away a customer for what they believe in, you might have a bunch of like white hoods marching on your front lawn, so it's like it's very it's very fine line. It's like that one scene from Borat 2 where he's at the bakery and he asked them to make an anti-Semitic cake. And I don't know if this was like a staged, thing or not for funsies or for jokesies. But do we hate the player or do we hate the game at that point? Do we hate the person who asked them to do this service, or do we hate the like business for fulfilling the thing?
Well, that's what I was like talking about earlier with that, guy from a punk bar who's like throwing out neo-Nazis before they even do anything bad, because it's like you can't have those people in here or else they're gonna bring all your friends and all of a sudden you're a neo-Nazi bar,
right? And
it's like kind of like, okay, if you serve a certain kind of people and then it gets out in their community that you're cool with it, it's like, is that okay? Like is that is it okay to then turn down, like, say if you did have someone that was like, oh, we're going to have a KKK rally for my grandpa's funeral. Like, I don't know. Can you say no? Like, if someone asked you that as funeral director, would your like business allow you to say no?
And at that point, like, I'm honestly so fortunate that I've not had to face any extremely tenuous topics like this head on that have made me like, I've been uncomfortable for sure. Mm-hmm, like I've heard politics being brought up and all sorts of things that make me uncomfortable, but I'm sure that there's going to be one day that my own beliefs are challenged and I'm going to have to make that decision to either put my client family first or like swallow my pride and just step back and honestly just ask another director to take over. Like, that's, I think, what I would do. I would just be like, I'm sorry, I can't serve you. It doesn't mean our funeral home can't, but I personally cannot serve you. And I would hope that my owner would have my back on that, at least that, we could still care for them. I just can't.
Yeah. I know, it's just like, it's such a weird, thin, hard like line, to be like walking all around all the time. We kind of saw it in too with COVID, like especially in certain areas, like having funerals are large gatherings, and having the masking policies and, anti-maskers and people not wanting to, honor the funeral home policy and stuff like this. I know you saw a lot of that. It's kind of like similar, if you have a whole family that's like anti-mask and, you're trying to protect yourself or, protect your employees or people that you work with. It's like, where do you just let them do what they want because they're grieving, or do you is there like a line that needs to be drawn? Right, exactly, for protection. Sometimes you have to do what's best for others, even though they don't want to do it for themselves. Yeah. But yeah, I'm happy that you brought that up, because that is like a taste of what this kind of is just. Like, I'm still getting flack for, like, mask stuff, because I still personally choose to wear a mask at work, and I got a negative review on the Google about it. Like, this is ridiculous. Oh, my goodness. I know. It's just like, oh, gosh, you guys are still not over this, huh? Right, exactly. It's hard to keep our professionalism when we're staring down someone we consider unjust or evil. I try to remember stories of Jewish and POC doctors and nurses treating patients with hate symbols emblazoned in tattoos and saving the patient's life, even though their convalescence beliefs don't even value them as people. In situations like this, in your workplace, in your daily life, what would you do? And that's all for this week on MortMic. We'd love to connect with you guys on our socials. Like, follow, and subscribe to us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at MortMic Podcast. That's MortMicPodcast. It would mean a lot to hear your feedback, so please tell us what you think in a comment and drop us a rating on whatever podcast hosting site that you use. If you have any suggestions on topics you'd like to hear about or burning questions you might have about death, shoot us an email at mortmicpodcast@gmail.com. I also want to give a huge thank you to our friend Marson for the use of his song titled Deputies of Death, which he produced just for our show. You can check out his Bandcamp at Marson, that's MARSON, music.bandcamp.com. Thanks, Marson. And be sure to tune in on the first Thursday of every month for more casual discussions on death. Thank you so much for listening. This has been MortMic. Bye. Bye.